I'm happy to take over the stage once again from Rosie. Thanks, Rosie. And once again, also a hearty Bavarian and Austrian servus to all the people in the here offline, on site, and also to all the people online at our stream. We have seen many startups from various stages, technologies, regions, and I've seen what an immense benefit the showcase was to the startups. Huge feedback from mentors, learnings, the possibility to present in front of you, in front of investors, in front of other startups, mentors, and also in front of a huge community online. So we have already also seen huge connections, so many connections at the Matchmaking Plaza, also online. As I mentioned today, we had about 1,000 booked meetings today, so that's really huge. Now we're gonna change to a topic I think that's relevant for all of us, that's relevant for the whole world, climate. And climate tech, why is it relevant? Because we are in a change. So we are in a strong change and are facing a major challenge to stay in a livable world. And a lot of players in the last years and also in the last month has shown up. So climate investors, green tech investors, also the politics in Austria are facing, and also the public grants are facing the opportunity to invest in green tech, in climate tech, and so on. And now we are looking at the Central and Eastern Europe and what's happening there. And therefore, the Wolf Summit, together with PwC, created the PwC Net Zero Future 50 CEE report. And they took a look at 27 countries across the CEE regions and what's happening there, which startups show up, which investors show up, what's invested, what will be invested, and what major challenges are we facing. And therefore, I want to hand over now to Jeffrey Macmillan. Jeffrey, please come on stage. Jeffrey, you're the Director of Brand and Communications at PwC CEE.
Correct.
And you're gonna, so as you heard in the introductions before, I am very aware of numbers and I love to see what numbers shows us. And now we're gonna take a look at the numbers from your report, and then afterwards we're gonna talk and discuss the numbers and also the takeaways of the report in a very huge and a very strong panel with different investors.
Thanks, Hannes, but please don't ask the Director of Brand Marketing and Communications to get too into the numbers. I'll save that for my colleague Jose from our ESG Hub, who will come up and present those in a minute. But again, I just did want to take a very quick opportunity to first of all say thanks to everybody, to say welcome to this session. At PwC, our purpose is to build trust and solve important problems. And in the CEE region, we are super passionate about the sustainable future development of our region and working with our clients and stakeholders to help unlock value creation through innovation. So that's why climate tech is a big topic to us, and that's why we've been working on this report with Wolf Summit and with, I see, many of our founders and other stakeholders and contacts that we've been working over the last 6 months to put together this report. So I just wanted to say, on behalf of PwC CEE, thanks so much to everyone who's been involved in this. We're really proud to roll out the results today in our report. We hope that the results will be interesting, that they'll be useful. We hope it's a strong step forward in helping attract more investment into the region and for helping take the next steps on our transition to net zero. The discussion that we're going to have is one I've been looking forward to for months and months, so I don't want to say too much more. But if you'll allow, Hannes, maybe we can just show one quick video from our colleague Agnieszka Gajewska. Agnieszka leads our global public government and public sector practice globally. In CEE, she leads our clients and markets practice and also our ESG services platform. So, Agnieszka is a big sponsor, a big stakeholder of everything that we've been doing, and she couldn't be here today in person, but she's recorded just a brief video message to say a few words. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll roll that clip, and then I'll get off the stage and hand over to Jose for the numbers.
Then let's hand over to her.
Great.
We leave the stage,
Great.
And afterwards the panel about the climate tech, the discussion starts.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's look at that, and then good luck for the rest of the session. Thanks.
At PwC, we are always looking for ways to build trust and achieve sustained outcomes. And the climate crisis is a major challenge of our time. Globally and in CEE, there is a huge momentum of net zero pledges. And the challenge now is meaningful action. One of the most exciting ways of making progress is to scale up the impact of climate tech solutions and to match investor funding with climate entrepreneurs. We are excited to have partnered with Wolf Summit to shine a spotlight on the climate tech ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe. Congratulations to the 50 companies featured in our report. I trust the report will be of interest to investors looking to make a real impact in our region. I wish you all a productive few days at Wolf Summit in Vienna and many successes in the months and years to come. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can we see the slides, please? Get some access. Okay. So before we start, just want to have a quick introduction about myself. My name is Jose Salazar, and I'm a manager in the CEE ESG Hub, which is a dedicated team based in Warsaw, serving our PwC Central and Eastern Europe region, which comprises of 27 territories. The report that I'm about to show you comes through a collaboration of roughly 6 months with Wolf Summit. We have been looking at the state of climate tech in these 27 territories, as well as 8 sectors of key focus in regards to what is the state of climate tech, startup investments in the transition to net zero. So before I start going into the data, I just want to mention a couple of things that we're seeing from a global level in terms of the net zero transition. The events of last year, this year, COVID, the ongoing Russian war in Ukraine, the ongoing rise of inflation, all of those are without doubt affecting our global decarbonization efforts. Our PwC Low Carbon Economy Index indicates that at the current rate of decarbonization, we will need to accelerate up to 11 times faster than we have done in the last 20 years. And this implies that we need to do several innovation activities across different sectors. The International Energy Agency suggests that there are 4 broad set of categories that we need to implement in terms of the net zero transition, one of which is building low emission tech and assets. And this is where this report comes to feel what is the current knowledge gap in the market, what is the state of climate tech on a global level, what is the state of climate tech in terms of the region. We have been doing research in terms of state of climate tech investments since 2020. We have identified that on a global level there are more than 3,000 climate tech startups, and that investments have been emerging at a very rapid velocity, becoming one of the most attractive asset classes. Last year alone, 14 cents of every BC dollar invested went to a climate tech startup. We see that this has been a very sustained growth year after year. However, when we look at the data, something that we're seeing very clear is that those investments are being concentrated in specific sectors and also in specific countries and also specific cities. So one thing that we started to ask ourselves since last year is like, we see the list of where are all these most active investment hubs in terms of climate tech startups. But something that we do not see is the representation of Central and Eastern Europe, cities or countries. So we wanted to understand further what is the situation. This year, what we went through was through a very detailed analysis process in terms of the investment data that has been put into the market since 2013. As well as to take a close look about what is the current state of climate tech startups in these 27 territories. We launched a climate tech pitch track in May in Wrocław in collaboration with World Summit. And afterwards, we launched a selection process where we invited roughly 170 climate tech startups in the region. We received 95 eligible applications, and then using our PwC Net Zero Future 50 methodology, we assessed all these companies against 11 indicators under 3 major categories. What is the maturity stage of this company? What is the scalability potential? And what is the impact that they can have in terms of the net zero transition, decarbonization efforts, and also broader environmental and social benefits. Before I jump into showing more about the profile of these selected Future 50 startups, I want to share some more details about what we see in terms of the aggregated data here in CEE. So CEE as a whole represents roughly 3.73% of greenhouse gas emissions. However, when it comes to investments, it hasn't even attracted 1% of the total of global VC climate tech investment funding. This generates a huge gap in terms of, let's say, what should be the adequate proportion of investments in terms of the emissions. Then when we start to breaking down the data into the sectors, just as in the global state of climate tech, we also see that mobility and transport captures most of the investments. Global investments are, CEE investments are roughly an equivalent of 1.7 billion, of which roughly more than 1 billion goes just to mobility and transport startups, followed by industry, manufacturing, and resource management. The sectors that you see here are based on which are the sectors that contribute the most emissions to the global economy. And then we also have 3 sectors: financial services, greenhouse gas capture removal, and software as a service solutions for climate change management and reporting, which in CEE we are yet to see significant sums of investments, and to some extent as well, representation from startups, climate tech startups in these sectors. In terms of where are the investment concentrated, it is very clear that most of the investments are concentrated in the Baltics, particularly Estonia and Lithuania. Each of them have raised more than 40% of the total climate tech investment since 2013. Poland, where our team of researchers is based, and which represents the largest economy in CEE, actually has attracted less than 5% of the total of climate tech investments. And when we see the growth in terms of climate tech investments in the region, it is very clear that it's also having a very similar pattern as the global landscape. Very sustained growth, positive growth, mainly driven by mega deals, which are deals that are valued at more than 100 million USD. And this is also where there's another funding gap that is being created. And if we could see, let's say, in terms of the region, the 27 countries that we're mentioning, in terms of where the emissions are allocated based on sector and where the investment is being allocated by sector, you can see that there's a very significant misproportion of the allocation. Most of it goes clearly to mobility and industrial manufacturing, but very little investment goes to energy and food tech related startups that they're focusing on climate tech solutions. So here we're not talking about energy startups or food tech that in broader terms, but more like specific solutions addressing activities related to net zero. And this is the selection of the Future 50 startups. Congratulations to all the founders and company representatives that are here today. I understand about half of the Future 50 startups are either present today or they are joining us via live participation. You can see that there's also, in the terms of the investment, there's more representation in certain sectors like food and agriculture, energy, industrial manufacturing, and lower representation in terms of climate change management and reporting and greenhouse gas capture and removal technologies. This is very consistent with what we see in terms of the investment data. Mobility and transport, though we have selected less startups, we also see that there's significantly more funding going to those. And just to give you a brief outlook in terms of what is the average profile of these Future 50 startups, I'll just take like 3 pages to show you in terms of every single criteria that we looked at. In terms of maturity assessment, it's very clear that most of the startups are in the early stages of their journey. Only 20% of the selection, they have secured Series A or B funding. The rest is either operated from seeds funding or grants, or it's bootstrap. We see that the median years of operation is 3 years. The average 4.44 years. And in terms of patent applications, actually about half of them, they either have a patent or are in the process to applying for one. But when we ask the question about like, how do you see the role of a patent in terms of giving you like competitive advantage in your market, only 6 of them replied that they think that this is the case, which signals that having a patent and an innovative type of technology, of course, is very important to give the opportunities for scaling. However, that alone is also not going to be like a huge breakthrough in terms of competitive advantage. Then in terms of scalability, we also asked to understand more about the levels of appetite in terms of growth in the short term. You can see that most of the startups, they have the type of technologies that is being applicable in more than one country. About 38% of them, they are also operating in more than one sector. And all of these, they display that they have huge appetite for growth and expansion in the short term. Half of the startups, actually, they use some form of IoT technology solution. So this also indicates that software as a service solutions, not as a sector, but within the type of solutions, is something very strong within the region. And we're going to come back to say some messages about this in a bit. But yeah, roughly 44% is also just mentioned that first mover advantage is a key differentiator. So all these things can give you like some sense of insight in terms of what are the sentiments, in terms of like the scalability, appetite, and potential. And this is also one of the most interesting findings that we saw from the research process, which is that in terms of the understanding and reporting and impact assessment of the technology and emission reduction potentials, 40% of the startups cannot precisely pinpoint or verify the data in terms of like what is the emission reduction potential, climate impact. We see this as a lost opportunity because in the current environment where climate tech investors or investors as a whole are increasingly trying to understand what is the impact of their portfolio companies, this is a space where founders and startup operators, they can strengthen their communication and also value proposition for the investors and also for society as a whole. This doesn't mean that these startups that have reported that they do not know their emission reduction potential, they do not have it. We clearly can tell that that's the case because we have a taxonomy and classification of climate tech solutions where we identify in which category they correspond and the estimated amount of reduction potential. A bit technical, but quite interesting. So anyways, this is an area that climate tech startups in the region can put more efforts, especially in the early stage, because impact assessment proposition is critical. And before we move into the panel discussion, just want to leave here a reflection from an early stage VC investor we talked with based in Germany, which is in terms of the transition to net zero, quoting Mark Andreessen's famous quote that software is eating the world. Of course it is and has huge opportunities in terms of development, has had so in the last 2 decades. But in terms of the climate change and net zero transition, we also need to focus on the deep tech, hardware, and also physical solutions, which ultimately is what's going to reduce the emissions and help us to bend the curve. And that's it for the presentation. Hope that it can give you some insights about this. Thank you so much, and we'd like to invite our moderator and panelists to the stage. Thank you. What do you want to say?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this introduction, Jose. A fascinating report. Congratulations. My name is Zosia Vanat. I am a reporter at Sifted, which is an FT-backed news site on European startups. If you don't know about us yet, please check us out. And I have a huge pleasure to moderate this panel about this fascinating topic that Jose has just introduced us to. As you can probably hear, I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I'm very glad that I've been joined today by this excellent panel who will definitely lead the discussion, and I will just ask very, very brief questions. I would like to welcome here with us today, first of all, Jose, who you know, who's just introduced himself. I'm just going to repeat that he's a manager at CEE ESG Hub at PwC. He was supposed to be joined today by his colleague, also from the same hub, PwC Hub, Ewelina Łukasik-Morawska, who unfortunately is still on her way because her flight was delayed. We hope that maybe she will be able to join us before the end of the panel, fingers crossed. We are joined here today also by Alicja Chlibowicka from the European Investment Fund, and also Niklas Bench, the head of startups and network at Austrian Angel Investor Association. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today with us. So just to kick off the discussion, I would like to ask you, based on the report that we've just seen the outcome of the report, but also based on your professional experience, if you were to describe climate tech startups in Central Eastern Europe, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I mean, what are the features of, is there a way of generalizing, what a climate tech startup in CEE is? Are there any features, any characteristics, anything that makes them different to climate tech startups from Western Europe? Is there anything like that? Jose, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you, Sasha. So in terms of that, I will say that the most immediate thought is that the ecosystem as a whole, this I'm talking about startups, but also let's say investment and networks, are in very early stages compared to the most active investment hubs such as San Francisco, Boston, London, and so on. This is one. Two, which is this a bit more looking at the founders and the future 50 startups. We see that many of them, they have a certain level of technical expertise, meaning like hard sciences, STEM. Many of them have work or operated out of the region, or have come back to the region to some extent. And that also the startups, you can see that have been in operation in less than 5 years. So actually many of them come after the Paris Agreement and SDGs. So they're coming in an age that for sure climate tech startups are going to get more attention from the investors. Yeah. And then in terms of investments, it's very clear that in a global level and also in CEE, the allocation of the investments are not proportionate. But in CEE, that case, we're seeing that is even less proportionate than on a global level. We see that particularly in the food and agriculture, energy, where it's roughly 2% of the investments, and some other sectors, we have not seen investment activity. So this is something that we see that is significantly different between CEE and the global.
Super interesting. Alicja, do you maybe have an overview that could help here?
Yeah, so hi, thanks for having me. I can't speak about the startups because as the EIF, we invest in fund managers who then invest into portfolio companies. I can talk about the general trend of VC and private equity firms going into climate environmental investing. We've seen a significant evolution in the past 15 years of investors moving towards this space, especially in venture capital. We have an emerging and burgeoning landscape. We are seeing select established teams coming into the market, and they are coming in usually, and we are seeing less of them in Central Eastern Europe, to be fair, but most likely it's going to as well show up. But I can tell you that there are new teams coming in. There are VC firms coming in, spinning out. So they're spinning out of VC firms. They're also coming out of corporate VC. And the trend is to move towards the thematic fund of the impact investing and the climate investing. In terms of private equity, we are also seeing more generalist funds and with a sector focus. So we do believe that eventually, as this is gaining popularity in terms of the market needs, we will hopefully get more applications from the Central Eastern European region. Thank you.
And Nicholas, from your perspective as an investor.
Hi, everybody. As we know, this whole topic needs to get more attention on the whole climate tech thing. We see that investors, especially private investors, angel investors, are shifting their attention towards this topic. Right now, there isn't enough funding yet, but I think there will be, or this gap will close sooner than expected. I think it's also a huge opportunity for the investors. There are a lot of startups with a great technical perspective, and as we see it, the people are hopping on this trend, want to shift their attention towards it, and I think they will start sooner than later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I was just wondering if we could build up on this point that you've mentioned a little bit. So, I mean, as you said, in Western Europe, in the US, there are more and more VCs, investors who focus on climate tech specifically, right? So they allocate certain. Fantastic. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, welcome, Evelina. We're very, very happy to have you.
Me too. There's so many issues finally here. I'm super happy, really. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. So let me just repeat the question, ask it again. We were just talking about how climate tech, CEE climate tech startups are different than Western climate tech startups, and we've briefly touched upon the topic of investment and VC investors. And I was just asking, I just wanted to get your view on this. We know that Western VCs, they at least they start to specialize, as you said, Alicia, specialize on climate tech. I personally haven't seen much of it in Central Eastern Europe. I've seen some funds, obviously, and there are some that send this message that they would like to. But do you think, is it going to change? Is it going to change quickly? And also, should there be some sort of external pressure maybe on those funds to set a bit of their funds aside for climate tech specifically? Should there be pressure from the LPs, for example, when they allocate their funds to the VCs? How do you see that? Do you think it will happen soon or at all? Maybe Evelina, would you like to start as you're,
Yeah, sure. Hope you can hear me. Yeah. Actually, I have this broader institutional investors perspective, basically because of my previous experience. But what we see right now, and maybe if you follow the last report published by the Climate Plus initiative, the biggest world initiative gathering investors, there is clear message that there need to be more investments when it comes to climate, and not only climate tech, but generally it's on the biggest companies level, and then it should be cascaded down to the funds. And because it's the investment driven initiative, we see that institutional investors are actually willing and prone to push it. So then it will be going down further to VCs. That's my perspective.
Alicia, maybe you would like to comment on this.
I can help here. So EIF is part of the European Investment Bank, and we are one of the biggest development banks in the world. And we are at the forefront of this change in Europe. About 50% of our financing is dedicated to climate action. So that gives you something. We have a commitment to dedicating that. We are also playing a key role in the design of EU regulations concerning investments into climate and sustainable infrastructure. We're contributing to the design of the EU taxonomy as well, while adopting the regulation to our investment activities. We are a core partner in the investment pillar of the European Green Deal. So we are sort of leading this. And what is encouraging, the EIF as a subsidiary who then deploys the money to the VC funds and the private equity funds, we've been doing this for the last 15 years, and we've committed over $1 billion in the past. And we're expecting to commit another $2 billion by 2025. We've already invested in 40 managers, maybe less of them in the CEE, but again, this is now growing, and I have confidence that this will come. We've supported over 400 climate and environmental enterprises, and we've seen 65 exits. So the money is, we are there, we are committed to giving that money, so all we have to do is make sure that we organize ourselves to get there. So that's, I think, the good news.
Right, Jose?
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention about that because all the new package of regulations under the EU Green Deal, especially like the EU taxonomy, this is going to significantly influence not only like the activities from the investors, but as well as corporations. In terms of private equity, like also what we hear from many is that they need to be thinking about the future. And let's say portfolio companies of today, the way that they're going to sell them tomorrow, they also need to consider like the transition towards net zero. And decarbonizing and the assets, and also engaging these companies to do so. So certainly this is something that we see that is going to get more velocity with all the forces taking play. We see that it's taking velocity. It's starting from a, let's say, lower base compared to some other markets. That's a fair thing to say. But then again, there's also true that if you compare, let's say, CEE cities with some of the most developed climate tech ecosystems or startup ecosystems as a whole, right? Like Silicon Valley, investments that are done there, on average, the sizes are significantly bigger. So we could also see that, let's say, certain funds, they can have a vertical inside of their investment activities that they have. That vertical happens to be climate tech, and then that amount of investment, that volume compared to, let's say, CE, VC funds or other type of funds, they will just be significantly smaller, right? But that's already because of the proportion of the size of the funds.
Super interesting. And Nicholas, like, do you think there will be more investors in the region who will focus on this topic?
There need to be more investors, and I think right now is the perfect time for climate tech startups, also for impact-driven startups to get ongoing. There isn't that much money in the market as it was 1 year ago, and right now a value behind an idea is really the key purpose that keeps especially private investors as well as VCs and other investors going. And climate tech startups do have this certain value, or most of them do have this certain value, and also can really expose it and show it. And that's why I think it's easier than it ever was before for them right now to gain the money.
I can add something like like some observation, because we think like the institutional investors or investors are really far away from where the startups are. But actually investors set their own strategies for being greener, and they have their own targets for the emissions and having the portfolio greener. So actually they really need startup. The more startup we have, the better for them actually. So they are investing in themselves, to be honest. That's I think something that maybe they're missing, and it's not so clearly messaged or not clearly understood yet, that they really need the startup, especially the one that are dedicated to climate.
Yeah, it's great that you're saying that, because yeah, this is like investors are only one part of this equation. There are also the startups, right? And yeah, and I mean, we saw in your report that 40% of the cohort that you gathered in the report, they didn't really know the impact their technologies have on slashing carbon emissions. And I mean, this is not a great signal for the investors, right? So is there anything more than that the startups from the region could do to actually go out there and say, look, this is my great technology, you international investor, please come and invest in us? Is there anything, are there more strategies that they could follow anything else that they could do?
Yeah, I think that it's really important just for the startup to be really clear about what they can offer and how this actually address the main issues. And for now, we see that it's mostly about carbon capturing and storing. Like this is the immediate thing that need to be addressed. But there are some other things that are coming, like the new directives that are underway. I mean, the one that are concerning deforestation. And given the fact that we have more and more like agriculture/land development startup, this is something that they could think about because the investors/bigger companies will have to address the issues of deforestation. And that this is also covered by the existing regulations, but it will be more stringent within the upcoming years. So I would say, think about what is upcoming too, see where you are now, like what are you missing in terms of communication also, because there are really great ideas, but there is issue with the good communication and just approaching the investors with, look, here is your issue, we are addressing the issues like that, and we can help like with having the impact of the, for example, carbon capturing or storage. And the other thing I think it's like startups feel that they are left alone. So this is like a huge need for the whole environment, the whole ecosystem to support them. And I also think about like institutions and governments in the like local institutions, local governments. So this is a work that needs to be done on this side too.
Can I add a bit on that one? So if we look at, let's say, investors in broader terms, they will come from different objectives, different time frames. So it's also not really that all the type of investors or institutional investors, they will come and be interested in climate tech on every single stage. Clearly for CEE, what we see is that they are on early stage. So there's a right class of investor for that, which will be the ones looking on seed funding and early stage VC investments. We could also think about that amount, let's say, is capped in CEE because of the amount, right? But we also see that in terms of dry powder, the amount of money that private equity firms or investors are holding, it's also at all-time high, and that there's appetite in general for looking for these technologies. So from the perspective of the startup, the very first thing that we see from the analysis that will be probably the best and most effective solution will be, number one, to understand their impact in terms of like the emission reduction potentials, be able to communicate it, and that includes like the thought process and analysis behind that, because of course that's a complex thing that requires assumptions. Not all the data is perfect. However, having that solid and robust process that can show to the investors, be able to communicate it, then they can be able to tell their value proposition and be able to attract not only, let's say, the investment from CEE, but also from out of CEE, because that's also where we see the huge volume. So we should try to see like how to bring that. And then this is also another thing about the connectivity of the hubs as in general. In general, like we see that hubs within CEE, perhaps with the exception of Estonia and a few other major cities, well, Tallinn, a few other major cities, startup hubs are not as developed. So it also comes on a much broader terms of like what others can do to help to improve like the network connectivity and resources within there. So actually these kinds of conferences such as Wolf Summit and also like the events that you have through Sifted, it's really part of the solution in terms of getting that visibility. Through the report, we try to aim to do that, give visibility to the Future 50 startups, to the right class of investors that are really hungry and actively looking to get them, and maybe just that they just don't find them, right? We hope that this can get some visibility, and yeah, let's see what will be the outcomes after the next few days.
Nicholas, what do CEE startups have to do that Austrian investors sort of come and invest in them?
I would first of all encourage, for example, local associations to like building bridges, building networks, showing the startups what opportunities they have if they are searching elsewhere for money and other resources. And it's definitely on events like here today to show who you are, to show what you are capable of, and really be out there we also encourage our startups to like use every stage they can. We, as an association, for example, we had a few trips to CEE countries in the past. We'll definitely do some in the near future. For our private investors, the region is attractive. Also, the verticals, the cases are attractive. And if we can do this, then, for example, German associations and business angels can do this, as well as from other countries. And it's all about connection and building bridges, and then hopefully it will work.
Alita, would you like to add something?
Yes. So I'd like to just highlight one of the biggest public-private partnerships we have on the ground with the support of the European Commission. What we have available is are these EIT, European Innovation Technology hubs, across all different policy verticals that are important to Europe at the moment. So in particular, you have, and what these hubs do, they basically connect the research and academia with corporates and startups who want to invest their time in creating or researching solutions within the certain verticals like health or food or now energy and mobility. So we have eight different ones. So you have different innovation hubs that are within the European community. In particular, you have EIT Climate Innovation Hub that is based in Germany with actually, I think, a presence as well in Switzerland and Austria, as we are here today. And you also have EIT InnoEnergy, which is also different offices around Europe, which have partners as well. If they don't have the main hub in the CE region, I know that there are partners that you can look through. Like in Poland, there's the Wrocław University of Science and Technology, and in the Czech Republic, there's an EIT hub as well. So that is basically there to help guide potential business with all the sort of European support programs that we have on the ground, like grants. They also have the acceleration programs. So there's plenty of things. I encourage everyone to explore these innovation communities because they're really trying to bridge everything that we're doing on the public side to the private side, and they're very powerful, and they can, let us win together. So yes.
Perfect. Great tip. Before we move this discussion forward, I would like to ask the audience if there's anyone who would have any question so far. Yes, no? Yes, there is a question.
Hello, my name is Swapan Chaudhary. I'm one of the companies who was listed, so I'm very happy and proud that PwC took this initiative. And my personal comment is, it's great to hear what all is going to happen, but from the perspective of a startup, we would like that it's happening now. Yeah? And I can tell you it's not happening now. We don't have really a lot of interest on the climate investment. All of it is about scalability, about B2B SaaS, etc. And once we say it's a B2B SaaS and hardware included, I like the comment of the deep tech, yeah? But in the real life, it's not attracting yet the investors. Yeah? So I personally would like to hear from you. What do you think, what actions or what the follow-up on this report can be taken that we can really see that something is happening? Yeah? And also a comment on the EU grants and so. So we were happy to submit an application on the EIC Accelerator Fit 55. But honestly, it's not so friendly for a startup. It's 4 months of work, and once I have downloaded the PDF of the application with a great business plan, it's 177 pages. Yeah? So it's perfect. Yeah, I'm really happy that a lot of initiatives is going on, but like that you hear the voice from a startup that we really need more support if we do something for all of us. Yeah?
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Excellent questions and the perspective that probably we've been missing here on the panel. Would you like to answer to this? Maybe first the question on the report and the follow-up.
Yeah, I get that question. Yeah, so our first objective from the report is to basically shine light on what's the situation, because this is something that we just simply didn't know. These are the things that we see. Though I will wish we could give all the answers, at this point we cannot be very conclusive, and also we hope that these recommendations or observations doesn't come from us, but we also hope that through the report, other stakeholders in the ecosystem can see these, and from their position that they could be able to see what are the best solutions, because it's not only, of course, regulatory forces, that's very important, accelerators, corporate ventures, investment side, but each of them, they have to play a certain role that will need to be kind of like looking back like from the local level, let's say, the stakeholder level. Yeah.
Would you like to add something, Nicholas?
Yeah, I'll hop on from my early stage perspective as an early stage angel club. If you are an early stage startup, I would suggest you visiting our website. There you can apply, giving us a lot of information about your startup. And we got more than 250 people within our network investing in all different areas, more than 20 million euros each year. And the best case would be if you would have an interested investor by yourself from a local country, for example, and then also connecting us with this guy or this lady, and then we could start talking, doing pitches online, per video, etc. We see that our people are interested in investing not only in Austria, but also in all over Europe. We even planned a trip, for example, to Slovenia and Croatia. Got cancelled again due to a few COVID delays. But that would be our possibility to give you the chance to present your case to 250 people here in Austria.
And yeah, there was an issue of EU programs and the EU funds.
So, yes, I think this is something definitely a feedback that has been mentioned many times. I do want to highlight lightly that I think we are always, when we work, let's say, with the financial intermediaries from the EIF, we're always trying to support in explaining how application processes work, so try to translate that. So I think at the startup level, I think the partners on the ground who are maybe providing the grants, I cannot speak for them as I am not deploying, but they're probably able to give kind of advisory services. I've also heard that there are consultants that support that. It's not ideal, I agree. Nonetheless, I just want to highlight the nature of public money. Public money comes with a lot of conditions. Public money is audited. It unfortunately is a bit different in nature than private money. What is important is to be able to have a little bit of a time frame in front of you to understand how it works. Definitely find, again, a local partner or an EIT hub that can sort of guide you through the process so it's a bit less overwhelming. And that is a way to sort of progress. Indeed, it's not the easiest. I think we're also working definitely we're trying to improve on the public side on how to deploy better and make things easier. But that also just takes a little bit of time. And so I just think that it's about a little bit more having a bit more time ahead of you to understand that will be like that for a bit, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to improve over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I would like to briefly touch upon this topic that you mentioned, Jose, in your presentation of the distribution of the investment, because I mean, from the whole report, I think I found it the most shocking when I saw the numbers of how much investment goes in which sector. Your report shows that only 1% of the funding in the last 8 years has gone to energy project, and we're talking about decarbonisation, where energy is actually the biggest, the energy sector is the biggest emitter. Like it produces the most, if I remember correctly, the most carbon emissions. And then a lot of money goes, on the other hand, on projects in mobility or transport, for example. And we're talking, I guess we're talking about mega deals. They're like big startups that are being backed here. And so this is how it is. It is how it is globally. We also know that from your report. It is how it is in Central Eastern Europe, but even to a larger extent. My question is this a problem? Is this a challenge? Is this something that we should fix? And if so, how can investors and startups and institutions fix it or like make it a little bit more even out? Would you like to, Evelina or Jose, would you like to comment maybe?
Sure. So, and also to add the details behind it, that the investment just looks at VC investment activity, private equity activities, does not look at loans, financing from the public sector. Of course, there's more investments in terms of that. This is what we see in terms of there. Right now, as I mentioned, some things we don't want to be too conclusive in terms of the things, but let's say some theories that could come in terms of what are the existing and legacy systems within the CEE territories. For many countries that coal, like as in Poland, represents a huge proportion of where the energy comes. Climate tech solutions in the energy sector mostly concern things regarding production of renewable energy, decarbonizing the grid. Comes partially from that, the infrastructure, but also, let's say, policy level in terms of different countries. Some of the barriers that could, let's say, hinder innovation in terms of that regard. There's a lot of things that need to be done from the public sector side, also, let's say, from investors in terms of exploring certain areas that maybe they have been more, to some extent, perhaps cautious, or maybe that they haven't explored as much. That's one of the parts that we want to see with the report, of shining the light that there are these areas, there are solutions upcoming, transfer of knowledge, and also like leveraging all the resources that you were mentioning, especially at the EU level, because this is something that we see from the Future 50 startups, that actually most of them report that, especially in the early stages of their journey, they have used grants from the Commission, or they have just received some of them or benefited from some accelerator programs. So these kinds of resources, completely understandable, all the difficulties that need to go through the process, but are things that, based on the upcoming goals, we will see more reprioritization of the EU budget. So there will be opportunities in terms of that regard, both for the startups and also the investors. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I will refer not directly to the report that we're discussing now, but the one that is already was published last year by PwC, the tech report, and just referring to some data points. So what was really interesting, and probably it's like identical situation in this way, is the fact that there are like only 1% of funding and only 1% of startups that are adopting to climate changes, and all of the funding is going actually to climate mitigation solutions. And this is like a clear indication for startup too. Like you see, there is the gap that you could address. Like you could think there are only 1% of startups that are addressing the climate adaptation or providing climate adaptation solutions. So this is the potential sphere to be more developed, and this is the gap that should be addressed both by investors and startup. And I think that I'm not sure, Jose, if we did such comparison for this report, but I'm sure it would be even less than 1% in our case.
Yeah, much less. In terms of that, like the proportion of mitigation adaptation solutions is much less. I can just recall one startup from the batch, adaptation, 49 based on mitigation.
And the ones that the least one actually are like future thinking. So this is something, and I know that we are all thinking about the current situation, but this is something to consider for the future actually.
Alicia, Nicholas, when you saw the results, were you surprised, or is it something that you've been seeing in your professional life so far?
I guess I don't have focus on this region as per se, but I did see a lot of elements that were in line. Thank you.
I would like to add on what you guys talked before, and especially you, Jose, mentioning regulations. That's what we are fighting against here in Austria, but that's what needs to be done in other countries as well as in the pan-European ecosystem. And I think if there would be better regulations for startups, especially in different verticals where the money isn't going that well, and especially where other resources are needed as much as money is needed, then they could definitely get a bigger chance to survive in the end and to succeed.
I would like to ask if there are any more questions at this point. Oh, there are two. Excellent.
Yeah, hi, my name is Anna Greta. I'm from Timbuktu, I'm from Tallinn. So great to see that we are listed on the top. Although from real life, I have to say that, you know, it's not so shiny, but I understand that's even worse elsewhere. So I think what we have to understand as well is that companies like we are actually also future thinking, and we are in a way educating the market. And therefore, I think that when it comes to financing, sometimes companies like us tend to be overlooked in a way that everybody is expecting like specific revenue numbers. And yeah, you're too small, you're too small. So the MRR is the main thing that's looked at. And this actually stops or prevents a lot of issues and creates barriers. So just to have this like, credit that, okay, you already make some revenue, but actually this environmental impact is much bigger, and therefore we consider that it's a good company. So I was attending just half a year ago this Stockholm Plus 50 UN event, and everybody was talking about digital transformation, digitally transforming the environment, having the data. So these kind of things are necessary because, you know, we don't have any years to really save our planet. So again, I mean, yeah, we need support now, and we just need to do the scale up, even though, you know, the numbers are not so relevant when compared to B2C startups, for example.
Perfect. Thank you for this comment. Would anyone?
I would have a question. So what was then the things you discovered when talking in early stages to investors? Were they interested? Were there barriers? What's your experience there?
Well, from my experience is still when you are not fitting to some number criteria, then they lose the interest.
Also really in the early stages?
Yes. And this is, I think, it's a big problem because you really don't get the access to the next phases anymore. So you really have to be bootstrapped. You really like are focusing to get the maximum out of the clients, but at the same time, when you're you know, expanding in African developing countries, for example, then you really don't want to bargain on the price, but you actually want them to get the use, to get the data, to make them understand how to reduce the emissions, how to really give the maximum value to the resources. So all these kind of things.
We, for example, we see two things. First of all would be younger angels coming in who are aware of this topic, as well as more women coming in who definitely are more aware than men that, for example, climate tech should be the one to focus on. And so I'm really looking forward to what's coming next. It's true that we need something now, but I'm sure that in the months and years to come, this will change, but maybe not that fast as we would need it to be.
We're running out of time, but I think we'll have time for one quick question.
It will not be quick, though.
Not great.
So the construction sector is responsible for 40% of the total CO2 emissions. 40%. This has prompted the World Economic Forum to say, quote, "We cannot tackle climate change without changing constructions." So I think EU is aligned with this. So we have the Green Deal program, which is doing a wonderful job. But constructions, however, are solid, are hardware. And this is nowhere near creating an appetite for VCs. So my question is, will VC funds voluntarily allocate a certain investment % to climate tech, or do we need an EU enforcement to do so? Thanks.
Sure, I could take it and probably address a bit of the previous question. So that this is like the complex thing within the landscape. Let's say that the investors there with different objectives and also different timeframes. So certainly not all the investors will have appetite for that. There will be some investors that they do. The most critical thing is like how to see to do the right matchmaking between, let's say, the startup within which specific industry sector, within which specific type of maturity and also risk and return profile can match with that investor that is looking specifically for that range. So it's more about gaining that visibility, certainly from the climate science perspective, the amount of where emissions are concentrated. We need to address them down to that sector level with certain specific solutions. There's not much way around that. Like we need to reduce the emissions. We need to retire certain high emitting assets earlier than expected, change cultural behaviors as well, and then the role of new technology. And the exciting thing about the role of new technologies, like of emerging climate tech startups here in the region and elsewhere, is that ultimately, when we talked about the other actions like decarbonizing, retiring early, still due to our economic activities, we need to find that alternative thing of how to continue the business models of the economic sectors, and that will be coming from technological innovation. Mm-hmm.
Would you like to know, Alicia?
Yes, so I just like to say that, I mean, we're not forcing, but as a lot of the money available now is up for climate and environmental support, that is an incentive for fund managers to adapt those thematic strategies in the future, and as we are seeing this emergence of thematic investing. So as we are supporting those thematics. So that's going to be a way to kind of incentivize the fund managers to do so. I think another thing I want to highlight is that the key sectors we've been discussing about, there's the energy decarbonization, but we have other sectors that we see as the European Investment Fund that are important to climate and environmental solutions. We have blue water and economy, we have the agricultural food tech, we have industrial biotech and green chemistry, circular waste and economy, and mobility, transport, and smart cities. There are plenty of investment themes that we are seeing success stories in. One of them actually in agricultural food tech is InFarm that brings vertical farming solutions to put down the amount of carbon emissions and also produce the food locally to lower the amount of water and make it more efficient. And so there's definitely a lot of successful stories across all these investment thematics. So I just think it's just about getting a little bit more information and also trying to be in touch with the different fund managers just to make sure what are the investment themes they're looking for, and if are they moving towards the direction of different options. So. A lot is available, just again, it takes time to establish the new grounds for the next sort of level of success in thematic investing.
Perfect, thank you so much. We are really running out of time, so I will have to close this debate right now. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you to the startups representatives who also joined the discussion. I think it was very valuable to have your voice here as well. Thanks again, and check out the report. I think Jose would like to add a couple of lines as well, right?
Sure, thanks, Sasha. Yeah. No, I think just in general terms, like, yeah, there's an existing carbon funding gap on a global level, even more in our region, even more across sectors, but some things that we discussed today is that there are resources available, like EU level, as well as also like associations, accelerators, and that the broader corporate and institutional investor community is interested in this. So we see those opportunities. We really hope that the report can also inspire conversations from your positions and also with others, and then see how this can help to build the ecosystem. You're welcome to find more details. It's about 8 pages. It's in PDF in the website. And the net zero transition ultimately will have to come from all the sectors. If you see that there's a space where we can help you or collaborate, please feel welcome to contact us.